What a miracle that we're all here. That we're all here together supporting each other. We support each other when the Cubs win the pennant. We support each other when we cut ourselves shaving. We support ourselves and each other through everything in life. You know, think about a rose. I used to grow roses. I don't anymore, but I used to grow roses, and it came to me that the rose is perfect at every stage of its development. The rose is perfect as a newly planted little shoot, and the rose is perfect as it's just coming up with no flowers, and then the bud, and that's perfect, and then the beautiful flowers that Linda Strickland takes the pictures of, and then when the petals drop, that's perfect, and it's all perfect. And in winter, when it's there looking lifeless, it's perfect. It's all perfect. It's all perfect together. It's all perfect. It's all God together. It's all God, and it's all good together. It's all good. So here, we're moving from stage to stage, unfolding like the flower, unfolding and growing and learning and moving and lifting up. But we move through different layers and levels, and we've got those two stages. Remember, you got to cut the ballast of the hot air balloon, and you've also got to create the spiritual energy that creates the lift. And both are necessary. But we're going to talk about how to work with each, and without overemphasizing one or the other. But when you're in one, you're in one, and when you're in the other, you're in the other. So from 1945 to this year, you're in one, and then this year in the other. That's not fair, is it? But still, these are called the pairs of opposites. We work through them because what results is growth. I am now in the presence of pure being together. I am now in the presence of pure being, and I am that pure being unfolding together. And I am that pure being unfolding. So what is your next stage, level, spiritual step? There's one. There's one. It's not only waiting for you, you're in it. What is this next that you're trying to move into? It requires that you move through the things that are in the way between you and it. Cutting the ballast. To mix metaphors, I've got another one for you. When I was a kid, there was a product out. It's not out anymore, probably thankfully. It was called Whip and Chill. How many people remember Whip and Chill? Jello's Whip and Chill. And my mom decided to buy some because, you know, they had nice ads, and they had talked about the Whip and Chill parfait, and she would make a Whip and Chill parfait. And that was one level of Jello, and another level of I don't know what it is, and a level of Jello, and a level of I don't know what it is, and Jello. And once I was going through a very difficult time in my life, and it was really rough. It was a Whip and Chill layer. And it came to me, I just saw the picture of my mom trying to serve her children this multi-layered thing. I was going to make it today, and I was going to bring it and everything. I cut myself shaving, so I didn't have time. But what is this? Well, let me tell you. You know, it's all good. It's all good because it serves the higher purpose. But sometimes this layer that we go through is that Whip and Chill layer. And do you know what was in Whip and Chill? This actually happened this morning. I was going to give this analogy and everything, and I thought, what was that stuff anyway? Oh my goodness. Here's the list of ingredients. I'm reading them in the order that they were in Whip and Chill. Propylene glycol monostearate. That's the number one thing. So I thought, what is that? It's antifreeze. Sodium caseinate, acetylated monoglycerides, cellulose gum, that's sawdust, hydroxylated lecithin, sodium silicoaluminate, and, this is my favorite, sodium stearoyl 2-lactylate.
Oh my God.
And whatever you're going through right now, if you're going through, you may be going through, because it's a wonderful celebratory morning because of the Cubs, you may be going through the Jello layer, you may be going through the sodium stearoid 2-lactylate layer. So, what do you have to do? Well, we learned, my sister and I, that you have to go through it, but you don't have to eat it.
Yeah.
I have to go through it, but I don't have to eat it. Together? I have to go through it, but I don't have to eat it. What does that mean? That means you don't have to take it on. You don't have to take it on if it's somebody else's stuff. They don't have to take it on if it's your stuff. You have a problem, but you are not a problem. You make mistakes, but you are not a mistake. You let go of the guilt and the self-recrimination, and you move through it. You say, yeah, there I am. Look at Jesus and his disciples. Look at these St. Paul, St. Peter. Oh, they got churches all over the place named after these people. St. Simon. All these greats, they were a mess at times. St. Simon was a guerrilla warrior who swooped out of it and killed Romans. He was a zealot, they call him, but that's what he did. St. Peter, what did he do? Well, he denied Jesus 3 times, and he was always getting into trouble. And St. Paul, he actually killed Christians before he became one. And he was, so you're saying, oh, fill in the blanks. Well, maybe it's a Whipple layer. Maybe it's let's pick a different ingredient this time, acetylated monoglyceride layer. And whatever it is, think about these souls who Jesus chose to move forward with a message. Think about your own soul. You are part of this wonderful unfolding universe, unfolding to a new level. Take the hammer out of your hand, set it down. But be willing to take responsibility. Be willing to take responsibility. Even feel remorse, but not guilt. You know, if an alien came in, somebody from another planet, and they came in and they looked around on this earth, they would think we were very strange people, one of the leading religions, not to criticize anybody across the street, but I'm just saying. There's a saying in Latin, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, found nowhere in the Bible, which is it's my fault, it's my most grievous fault. Well, it's not your fault, but you are responsible. My very first church, the first man I ever counseled in my life as a minister, and boy, did I have performance anxiety. And I was sitting there with this man. He'd never been in my church before. He never went to the church after that. You'll know why. And he was sharing with me all these terrible things in his life, and they were very, they were real. I mean, I was very empathetic with him. But he kept, every time I talked to him, I said, oh, I can't do that because I can't do that. I finally said, at some point, there's something about this you need to take responsibility for. And he stood up and he said, it's not my fault. And I said, I know it's not your fault, but you are responsible. Oh. What do you mean? I said, you're responsible for what you're going to do now. You know, somebody once said, play the cards you've been dealt like they're the ones that you wanted. Take responsibility for your life and do the best you can with what you have. If you got the Whipple layer, you may scoop it out like my sister and I and set it on the side of the thing, but you still have to work through it. And take responsibility. Remember the story of the prodigal son. Well, let me finish that story because you're going to wonder what happened to the guy. He stormed out, sadly. So that's the end of that story. But the prodigal son was the greatest example of this. It's about not being guilty, not going and fuzzing it out, not pretending like it's not happening, but taking responsibility. And it does include self-awareness. This guy wanted his inheritance when he was young. He wanted to spend it all, which he did, on who knows what. And he found himself sitting in a pigsty looking at the pigs thinking, man, they got better food than I got. Then he remembered his dad. And that even though he'd given up on all of his inheritance, maybe he could go back and eat better food than this. And it says, these are the words, he came to himself there in the pig pen. He came to himself. You become aware, you become self-aware. You say, yes, I will take responsibility. I will own this. And he did not feel guilt. He felt remorse. He was honest, getting out of denial. But he did not blame himself. He instead came to himself. And he moved forward, and you know the rest of the story. It all turned out great. But my point is that you and I need to move through those layers and realize that we are not those layers. That you were made of star stuff, that you like those saint this and saint that and all these different great people. They were crusty. They were tough people who accomplished great things because they didn't stop. They didn't stop at that level of whatever it was that was going on. You are not the story of your life. You are that soul in evolution that is growing and learning and yearning and uncovering and unfolding greater and greater levels of expression once you get through the Whipple. Once you cut the ballast, once you and then generate the energy for a lift up. lift off, lifting up. Heaven, kingdom of heaven. It's the kingdom of heaven consciousness. If you don't want to call it Christ consciousness, the word heaven and the word heave come from the same root, lifting up, heaving, lifting up. And it's a conscious act of will to do this thing. You know, there's a wonderful example of letting go of the self-recrimination. I'll get that later. It's a mistake. It's like this. This is a visual aid. You know, this little number right here that I spent an hour and a half trying to stop. So what is that? You know, I went through, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? What are they going to do? And I just thought, they're going to think what they're going to think, they're going to do what they're going to do, and I got to take care of this. In your life, what are you working on? You're going to, well, what are they going to? They're going to think what they're going to think, and you're going to do what you're going to do. So this is a guy, his name is Steve Ettridge. He is the CEO of a corporation called Temps and Company. It's a temporary agency, and it's now worth, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. But when he first started off, this guy could only afford to hire the greenest, newest recruits, people who had just graduated from school. And guess what they did? A lot. They made a lot of mistakes because they were inexperienced, because that's all he could afford. But there was a problem. Every week he would discover their mistakes too late to keep from causing other mistakes, because people would never tell him about the mistakes even when they found out about them, and it caused more and more difficulty. And he realized these people are afraid to tell me when they screw up, because they're afraid that I might be upset or disappointed with them. Maybe they feel guilty. I need to do something to fix this. So what he did was, every time they'd have a staff meeting, he put $1,000 on the middle of the table. Well, the first time he did this. I don't think it was $1,000 every week from then on, but the first time he put $1,000 out there, and he told a story about something really stupid that he did that week, a really serious mistake, and he said, $1,000 to the person who comes up with a story that's better than mine, that's better than everybody else's. We're all started, and he went around the circle, and everybody told him all the things that they'd made mistakes on that week so he could take care of it. And nobody was fired, nobody got in trouble, and as it grew to hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, they continue to do it in all their locations. Not the 1,000 a week, but they still do that. They reward people for admitting their errors. You know, you get a reward when you admit your error. What do you get? Spiritual growth. What are you here for? Spiritual growth. What's the bottom line of your life? Spiritual growth. Yeah, but I'd rather have everybody think I'm wonderful and recognize me for being the cool person that I probably don't think I am, but I want them to think that. Get off that one. So, there was a guy in my first church. I was in Los Angeles suburb at that time, and this guy worked in an investment banking firm downtown, and I didn't really know him. He came up to me between services, and he told me I made on Friday, I just realized on Saturday, I discovered that I made on Friday a $2.7 billion error.
Oh, wow.
And he said, I don't know what to do about it. So we prayed, and he said, and I said, tell me what you do. What came to him was, he went to his boss on Monday morning, and he said, he told him what he did. He said, but before you fire me, I'm in a unique position, since I made the mistake, that I know what to do to fix this. So I want you, before you let me go in and do what I can do to make this right. And then do what you got to do. And this boss was so impressed. The boss was not happy. This boss was so impressed by his willingness to do this that he said, okay, I'll let you do this before I let you go. So the man went and did it. And the boss, it was so successful, the boss was so impressed with his work that he kept him on. Who would you want around you? Who do you want in your life? A person who makes no mistakes? A person who's just always just floating along, listening, happy-go-lucky? Or a person who owns what they own, who's real, who deals with what they deal with, and cleans up after themselves? Isn't that wonderful? Can we let each other off the hook? You're willing to let each other off the hook? Yeah. Look around at the people around you and say, I want you to look at the people around you, I want you to all say out loud, I'm letting you off the hook. Together? All right, now. Now I want you to say, I'm letting me off the hook.
I'm letting
Again, it's not license, it's not irresponsibility or going in denial, it's just, and it may include remorse, but it's the remorse that says, I can do better, I can do better. Carol Dweck has this, well, she's a Stanford psychologist, I think. Social psychologist, that's why I got it mixed up. Anyway, she wrote a wonderful book about two mindsets, it's called Mindset, and there's the mindset of growth and there's the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset said, I am just the way I am, and there's nothing I can do about it. And then the growth mindset says, no, I can always change. I can always learn. I can always evolve. And it's a powerful piece of work because there's always something you can do. If you have a fixed mindset, you just sit there and you think that, you're just craving and addicted to getting positive feedback because that's all you got. But if you know you got a growth mindset, you can go, oh yeah, I can do something with this. I made a mistake, I am not a mistake. I have problems in my life, but I am not a problem. And everybody else as well. Everybody else as well. There's a wonderful article that I read about people with HIV. They did a study of the people who had the best outcomes with HIV. Now, when it first started out, HIV was a death sentence. There really were, there were no medicines. Now, people can really manage and last and live for many, many decades and even have their full lifespan. But it wasn't always the case. But they did a study and they wanted to see who had the best outcomes and who compared to others. And they found 7 factors. And usually I don't go through big long lists, but I love these 7 factors of growth that determined who would succeed and who did not succeed in overcoming AIDS. The first is they accept the diagnosis, but they reject the prognosis. They accept the diagnosis, that means they get out of denial and they look at the thing just as it is. But they reject the prognosis, which means the doctor's telling them it's going to be this long. How many people in this room have ever been told or know somebody who's been told something negative medically and it didn't turn out that way? Raise your hand. Yeah. They don't know. They make their best guess and sometimes it's useful, but reject the prognosis. Accept the diagnosis. You know what you work with. You know what you're dealing with. It's whip and chill. You're working through it. You can go through it. You don't have to eat it, but you can move through it. So that's what they do. The second step, and I love this one, is that they're feisty. They have the attitude of the spiritual warrior. They have a fighting spirit and they don't fall into helpless, hopeless. That means they pick themselves up and they move forward. They come to themselves. They take responsibility for their lives. That's what that gentleman, and maybe I lack the skill as a 27-year-old to share this in a way he could hear, but that man who I said, you can take some responsibility here, he was not willing to do that. But where in your life can you take some responsibility? Where in your life can you take some responsibility and say, yes, I've got a fighting spirit. And you don't let the circumstances of life determine for you the who that you are. The third one is they have changed their behavior. They've changed their behavior. That means the dietary or the medical or the exercise or the mental behaviors. Changing your behavior. Where in your life can you take some real and meaningful steps to move forward? Again, in my first church, I had somebody come in, and this is just like this last guy. He never came to the church before or after, but he would come in every 2 to 3 weeks drunk. And he would be really inebriated. How he drove there, I don't know. And he would talk to me and he would want me to help him and pray with him so that he could keep drinking but not be an alcoholic. So I don't believe in all that 12-step stuff because I know with God all things are possible and I can just keep drinking, but I still be an alcoholic. And so I didn't know any better. I didn't know from AA or Al-Anon. I just was talking to him and I tried to convince him, reasoning with him. Then after unsuccessfully doing this, beating my head against this for many months, I finally called a minister I knew that really knew about recovery firsthand, an AA person, many, many years successful recovery. And I asked him about this. He says, oh, Greg, you got to know this. Never argue with a drunk. He says, that's your slogan, just remember that. Because they have way more practice saying their thing and doing the thing than you do and what you're going to say back. So instead, set a standard and simply say, I'm happy to talk to you, I'm happy to work with you as long as you show up sober. Well, next time he came in, I said that. You couldn't imagine the blue streak of obscenities that came out of this guy. And when he stormed out, I figured I'd never see him again. Well, I didn't see him for month after month, and I figured, well, that didn't work, but, well, at least he's not coming in anymore. Okay. Then he showed up one day. So he said, I hit bottom again about a week later, and I realized, remember what you said, and that was my turning point, and I went into recovery, and I haven't taken a drink since.
Wow.
So the point is that you got to change your behavior. You have to change your behavior. There may be something that, you say, oh, I want to grow spiritually. But if I said, I'm going to say, how many people in this room want to grow spiritually? Raise your hand. Yeah, you got to change your behavior. Yeah. Now, how many people want to grow spiritually? Good, good. And you'll be tested. You'll be tested. There'll be the time that you need to do something spiritual. Maybe forgive somebody or not retaliate. Maybe do some journaling. Maybe do some prayer and meditation. Maybe walk around the block or change your diet or change something. And you'll be tested. You'll come up against yourself because life is full of these whip and chill layers. And that's a whip and chill layer that you have to change your behavior. The fourth one is you got to have good boundaries. Good boundaries. What are good boundaries? That means not always doing what everybody else wants you to do. And not always doing what your lower self always wants you to do. Being willing to say no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes. The studies have shown that the people who overcome terminal illnesses are people who change their relationships with their families. That doesn't mean that you abandon your family, that you wall them off or whatever. It just means that you do what is internally determined from within your own being. The internal. David McCullough, who wrote the biography of Truman and John Adams, said that what he noticed, the reason why he picked these people, is that they were internally driven. In other words, it was the internal spirit within them that made the decisions, not public opinion or everybody else or their families or all these outer circumstances. And so where in your life can you turn within and find your own internal spirit, your own internal guide? That doesn't mean that you don't ask for help outside, but that you have good boundaries. The fifth one is that they're honest about their illness. That means that they don't sugarcoat it. As Martha Creek says, it's reality, honey. Make friends with it. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't make you wrong that you have problems. It just makes you human. Last time I checked, everybody in this room was a human being. So just being honest and saying, oh, I'm honest about whatever it is that I'm going through. I can accept myself, cherish myself, and love myself in the midst of whatever this is. And if it doesn't show me up as being perfect. Remember, Jesus said, be ye perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. The word perfect, that was translated from, meant not nicey and everything your way. It was perfect, meaning whole and complete. That is, if it's a parfait, which is French for perfect, it has layers and layers and layers. And it's all parfait, perfect. So being perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect, meaning you're in a process that is parfait, and it includes scooping off the whip and shell till you get to the good stuff. Finally, the sixth one is they took the doctor off the pedestal. That means your authority is within you, not within anyone else. So it's okay to get advisors. And I notice this, and I'm going to be kind of tough here, but I notice this especially in this area that doctors sometimes, I get counsel people, doctors can be pretty hierarchical. So you don't have to buy it and you don't have to take it. And and you can fire your doctor and get somebody who's open to alternative medicine or open to another way of looking at it, or just doesn't insult you all the time or whatever. So you have your own. Get them off the pedestal. Get your minister off the pedestal. Get the other people in your life that you've been putting on a pedestal off the pedestal. And then the seventh one is they help others selflessly. They help others selflessly. That means they're willing to do service for other people, get outside of themselves. They're willing to volunteer. I notice the healthy people are the people who show up for volunteering. And I love the way we do volunteering in our church. We don't burn anybody out. You just do it once a month. And it's just kind of a dance, because it's against our religion to burn out. Speaking of burnout, I got to use these principles when I went through my burnout in my very first church, because I was a workaholic. I mean, a serious workaholic. I came down with a horrible respiratory ailment. And what I read when I was going through this was that there's 3 steps to overcoming something like that. And the first is to admit to it. The second is to ask for help. Jesus said it's impossible with humans, but with God all things are possible, so you got to get some higher power in there. And the third is follow what comes up next. Cooperate with what comes up next. Well, there I was, and I knew I was really tired all the time, because all I did was try to fix things and do things and do things, and I wasn't doing anything for personal renewal or spiritual renewal. I was a workaholic. There I was. And so what happened was I came down with a horrible respiratory ailment that only cleared up on Sunday mornings 5 minutes before the service started, and then it would come back when I got home, and the rest of the week I would be flat on my back. This went for 6 weeks. Flat on my back, and if I got out of bed I would start coughing uncontrollably. But again, it was a God job. It was a spiritual illness, because during the Sunday morning services I was fine. Very strange. And I asked, I felt so guilty because I was not doing and doing and doing. One thing I found out was that nobody really missed it. I was doing it for me, you know? And so I asked, oh God, what more can I do for these people? And I got, you could do less. You could do less. And I had so many different experiences that affirmed this. That week, I picked up my Myrtle Fillmore book, and in it she said, sometimes Spirit will give you a hint that you need to rest, that you need to harmonize yourself. Spirit will give you a hint, and if you won't take the hint, you'll get the kick. Myrtle Fillmore, who was a very tough-minded person, said that, and I thought, gosh, maybe I'm supposed to do something about it. So I started created a calendar that I scheduled time off, and I also started counting my hours, which horrified me when I got up in the 80s and the 90s. And I realized, oh my gosh, I can take time off. I went on a safari every week. In those days, I was single, and I'd just get in my car, and I would just drive. I would do something completely unexpected, unplanned, spontaneous. But we can also schedule those times of nurturing, the meditation times. I wasn't doing it. My real inner work at that time. So what can you do to own your life, to take charge of your life? Jesus said, what does it profit you if you gain the world and lose your soul, which is your life force energy? And when I made the changes, I got well, and I haven't looked back. There have been a few slips here and there, but I've been able to work through it. So in your life right now, ask yourself, where do I need to break out of the box? Where do I need to move past the whip and chill layer, but be willing to move through it? So let's just take a meditation here real quick. And take a deep breath, let it out, and just own your life. Just say, I am the indomitable spirit of the Christ consciousness in me. I am the strength and the vigor of my higher self. I am the courage of my higher nature, my spiritual nature. I am a spiritual warrioress. I have an inner strength, an inner power, an inner light. Whatever I'm facing, whether it's a mistake or a problem, I am not that mistake or problem. I may have it, but I don't have to eat it. I may have to go through it to uncover greater and greater good. So I make my commitment to my soul, and I let everybody off the hook as well. Thank you, God. And so it is. So just take a deep breath, let it out. Set aside any papers you have in your hands and open your palms. Be free. Imagine in this moment that you want to make lift off. You want to lift up into what many of us call the Christ consciousness, the spiritual consciousness. First of all, you have to know that there is such a presence, a beingness inside you, within and above. That the Christ nature, the Christ consciousness, the presence of pure being, is in charge right now. The first thing you have to do is generate this energy. Imagine that you're in a hot air balloon. They're on the ground. The ropes are tied to the sandbags all on four sides. You're in the basket. You're looking up. And the warmth of spiritual energy, the flame of God essence is filling this wonderful balloon that's above you. You're affirming to yourself, I am in my Christ consciousness, and my Christ consciousness is in me. This is building this energy, creating this life. I am my higher nature, and my higher nature expresses through me. My Christ consciousness shows me the way. And I am experiencing a revelation through my Christ consciousness. My Christ consciousness is that power, that presence in me. And I am that presence and power that is the Christ consciousness. My Christ consciousness is the energy, the essence, that I feel tingling all around me and within me, lifting me up. And I am that presence and power, that energy tingling, that is this higher presence. I lift up into my higher nature by cutting the ropes on all four sides. And I am gathered aloft into that kingdom of heaven, which really means lifting up. I'm in that lifted up consciousness. Up. Up. Lighter and lighter. I am aloft in my higher self. And my higher self lifts me up. I feel the giving and receiving flow of my higher nature. I am free in the wide open spaces in the open air. I am free in the light. The essence, the energy, the good heart, the courageous spirit, the strength of mind, of my Christ essence, my higher nature. And however you wish to visualize this, if you can see yourself aloft, or just feel it, just do this now in a moment of silence. I am in my kingdom of heaven consciousness, and my kingdom of heaven consciousness is in me. And I am lifted up, and I am at peace, And I am that radiant spirit. I'm lifted into the wide open spaces. The air is fresh. My spirit is pure. And I am. Thank you, God, for my courageous spirit, the light of heartfelt courage. Thank you, God, for the steadfastness and strength of being that moves me through everything. Thank you. Thank you. And so it is. Amen. Well, let's bless our offerings today and know that it's our generous spirit that's expressing as we put our offerings forward, knowing that we're opening ourselves up to receive more and more abundantly. So as I express my generous spirit, I receive more and more abundantly. Together, as I express my generous spirit, I receive more and more abundantly. And silently. And again aloud together. As I express my generous spirit, I receive more and more abundantly. And so it is. Amen.